You set foot on foreign soil. Only this land isn't ruled by any country or government. In this land we celebrate music. In this land we celebrate games. In this land we celebrate those who compose video game music. Welcome to the VG Embassy. Welcome and thanks for tuning in to another episode of the VG Embassy. This is a show centered around video game music and the amazing online community of fans and podcasters that enjoy it. My name's Ed, and on each episode I'll take the role of Prime VGM Minister and invite a guest VG Ambassador onto the show to share with us their own video game music culture. Or I may share a part of my culture on a solo show. We've got a rockin' episode for you today. My guest VG Ambassador with me is none other than half of Rhythm and Pixels, Mr. Rob Nichols himself. Rob, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing okay, man. It's crazy not having Pernell in the same room with me, but you know I'm gonna make it through. I'm gonna cope. I might call you Pernell a few times. My co-host's name.
That would be. I'd be honored. That's fine with me.
But no,
he's an awesome guy.
I'm really excited. I'm a big fan of the VG Embassy. I'm a big fan of yours, and I'm really excited to share my culture with your listeners.
Well, I'm honored. Thank you for the compliments.
Thanks.
Now, speaking of culture, we kind of share this culture a little bit. What are we going to be talking about today?
Today is all about drum and bass music. So drum and bass, jungle, D&B, everything in between. Yeah,
lots of really good techno and electronic music going on today. Yeah. We kind of came up with this concept while we were recording our last episode together. We did the Hideki Naganuma show, and we had like a million other people with us just kind of partying and listening to some Naganuma music. But we were talking, and during the episode, I think, you were like, yeah, I love drum and bass. And I just kind of looked at you, and I was like, really?
Yeah.
I love drum and bass, too. So we just decided that this would be a show that needs to be done. So here we are.
Me and drum and bass go way, 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 way back.
Yeah, you know, I kind of got into it through video game music.
Cool.
Started off really getting into techno through the Ridge Racer soundtrack.
Oh yeah, that's a good place to start.
Yeah, I had no idea what kind of techno that was, and I desperately wanted to find other techno music to listen to. So this was like kind of before the internet. I didn't have the internet at the house, and so I would just go out and buy random techno compilation CDs at like, you know, Strawberries or whatever.
God, me too. I did the same thing.
And so I was kind of like, what sounds like Ridge Racer? I can't find anything that sounds like Ridge Racer. But in the process of doing that, I got all these compilations of jungle and drum and bass and happy hardcore and all this stuff, and kind of learned what these different genres were and learned to appreciate them kind of almost accidentally.
Yeah. I got into it when I was 1998. I was in art school in Wilmington, and a friend of mine in school was like, hey, what music are you listening to? And I told him at the time, I think I was listening to stuff like Aphex Twin and Square Pusher. And he was like, oh, that's all jungle. I was like, what's jungle? And he's like, oh, you know, it's just real fast. You'll like it. And he came in the next day with like an armful of records, and he said, this is yours now. Like, you can just take them.
Wow.
And I still have them to this day, and it's super, super old school, like early 90s, like drum and bass before it was called drum and bass. When we can talk about some of the history of the music later, but after that, I was just hooked. My a part of my family moved away to London, and when I went to visit them in '99, that was like the year I was exposed to a ton of it. I was exposed to
like ground zero.
Yeah, drum and bass. UK garage was just becoming a thing, and that was also the first time I played Dance Dance Revolution. It was the first time I was exposed to it in '99. So, oh my God, it's been like 20 years I've been playing that game.
We start dating ourselves when we talk about stuff.
But no, really,
still feel like 1999 was 10 years ago, and I'm like, no, it's 20 years ago. That's not cool.
Yeah, but I'm really excited. I love this music. I've always loved this music, and I love the way it's changed over the years, and it's really interesting hearing its influences in video games.
Absolutely. And we've got a ton of video games, lots of different genres from a lot of different eras of gaming, but all still within that drum and bass sound. So let's say we get into our first track of the night.
Oh, I'm so excited.
All right, what do we got?
All right, so my first pick is from Street Fighter 3 Third Strike. This is in the arcade, composed by Hideki Okugawa, and this is called Killing Moon, or Koyusiu Street. Love this tune.
All right, we'll be right back.
Yes, this is Killing Moon from Street Fighter 3 Third Strike, composed by Hideki Okugawa. Man, I love this song.
Oh man, this whole soundtrack is absolutely incredible. One of my favorite fighting game soundtracks of all time.
Oh yeah, it's like one of my favorite fighting games ever. Probably still one of my favorite fighting games, if not my favorite. But like, when I first saw this game, I was working at an arcade, and so many people were not into the soundtrack. They said it because they were all expecting that kind of cool jazz from like the Marvel Capcom games and the Alpha series.
Yeah.
And then when like the opening screen is like that cool hip hop track, and then all of this drum and bass music starts playing, people are like, "That's not Street Fighter." And I'm like, "I know, it's better." We got it.
100% accurate on that one. So this was a game that my buddy Jay and I used to play a lot. I used to hang out at his house. He's like a big time producer at Digital Eclipse right now. But he and I were so into this game, and he and I used to go out to before the internet, where you can easily find import games all over the place. He and I used to go down to New York City, Chinatown, Elizabeth Street, where they had a whole bunch of very high profile import game shops.
Oh. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were going to the arcades, because I remember going to Chinatown.
Oh, yeah. Well, they had arcades there.
I remember going to Chinatown Fair a whole lot.
Yeah. And so we would head down there, pick up some import titles, and I remember seeing the Street Fighter 3 OST retail disc on the shelf. Ooh. I was like, I have to get this. It's because the music, because we had the Dreamcast game at the time, the PS2 version hadn't come out yet. The music on the Dreamcast version is like kind of heavily compressed. It sounds really muddy. I was so happy to have like a real Red Book audio CD quality. And I didn't even know it, but when I opened up the package, there was a mini CD in that OST with all the rap tracks when Infinite did all the vocal tracks for like the character select. So it was a little mini disc of like remixes of all those rap tracks on it.
I gotta find that.
Incredible.
Is that archived anywhere online? I gotta see this now.
I don't know. Cool. Maybe I can probably make some MP3s and shoot them your way. But there's really cool stuff on there.
Oh my god, that sounds so cool. Yeah, it's so funny. I know it was so heavily compressed because when the remember mini discs came out.
Oh yeah. Little recordable discs.
Yeah, because CD recorders and burners were so expensive at the time and so slow, and like you would spend 3 hours burning something and it might not work. So I got a mini disc player that was also a mini disc recorder, like mobile.
Oh, cool!
I was so obsessed with it. I would plug it into my Dreamcast and I would record soundtracks from the Dreamcast, and one of them was Third Strike. And I would walk around like going to work, and I would walk around outside, and I would drive, and I would be playing this music all the time, and it was always like compressed. But it was cool because in the game, there were versions of the song that were for like the first round, the second round, and the third round.
Yep.
And the instrumentation would change a little bit. And so like when the round ended, it was like I'll hear a little record scratch, and then like the music would change. It was just, I love this game, man. I can just get into it.
It was really contemporary, I think, when it came out. The music was, Street Fighter 2 had always been a little, I'm not going to say behind the times, but because the soundtrack originated, in the early 90s. By the time, like, Super Street Fighter Alpha Turbo EX 100 billion came out, the music was like you've heard all these tunes before. So when Third Strike was finally out, it was like, wow, they've really updated the whole feel. It had this much more urban, gritty atmosphere to it, and this music just completely fits the tone of that game 100%.
Yeah, I mean, like, so I have it written down here. So this game was released in 99, and it was such a dramatic shift in those musical styles. And so much of the game had drum and bass influences. And I wrote a little extra stuff. I made some extra notes for every track that I picked, because this track is a good representation of the jungle style. And so jungle was derived from breakbeat hardcore that came out of England in about the early 90s. And so at that time, like, techno was getting faster and faster and harder, but it was still like a 4/4 rhythm. And then suddenly people were like, how about we take these hip hop breaks, like the Amen Brother break and the Funky Drummer, like all these like James Brown samples that we would use for hip hop, like Public Enemy. You hear it all in Public Enemy, but let's speed it up. So we're listening to music that's at like 140, 150 beats per minute. Let's speed up those breaks faster and faster and faster. And so that's why, especially on these older tracks, you hear these kind of weird time stretching artifacts with the breaks. And most of that's intentional nowadays, but back then it was a limitation of our hardware.
Yeah, exactly. We just couldn't record at a high enough bitrate to speed up and slow things down without hearing those gaps in between the samples, and that's what creates those sounds.
So jungle was really all about that sound early in those days, and it hadn't even gotten that fast yet. Most of the time the beats were still 4/4, but it was just these breaks on top of it going. And the name, I had to look this up because I wasn't sure if, like, at this point, I'm like, something. You always have to worry that something you love might be racist, and I'm like, why were they like? What is the name Jungle coming from? In early '90s in like the UK, a bunch of white guys in a rave. Like, what is this all about? But the name Jungle actually came from a pioneer of this music. His name was Johnny Jungle, which was his DJ name, and it refers to the people of Arnett Gardens in Kingston, and so they called their town the Jungle. And so when he was releasing his mixes, he called himself a junglist because that's where he was from.
Oh, okay,
and that
cool.
name just sort of stuck with whatever it is. And so now it's mainly associated with that style of music that we just heard, although this was definitely like a lot faster and more, I don't know, more Asiatic influenced. But yeah, it's pretty rad, and it's usually really gritty, and it's usually just all about the amen break chopped up a whole bunch of crazy ways.
Yeah, I always wondered because, it's called jungle music, but it never really had that, like, what I would consider like a jungle feel, like, paddling down the Amazon River or something. So it's kind of a disconnect between the sound and the name. So that's really cool to find out.
Yeah, the evolution of the music is just, because it evolved like almost over a really, really, really short period of time, but at a time when rave music was really exploding in the UK and just barely reaching the States. Like by the time jungle and drum and bass were becoming huge in the UK, we were just getting into trance. Like that stuff was just hitting our shores. And then once we hit trance, Americans were like, oh, it's over. It's all I want to hear now.
Yeah, and then everything, I mean, trance was so light and fluffy and airy that drum and bass was such a 180-degree change from that.
Yeah, I guess I should say, that this music is not for everybody. Like some people hear it and they're like, it's so fast. There's so many sounds kind of repeating and the hi-hats are kind of crazy that it makes people feel like nervous and kind of on edge. My wife hates it. She cannot listen to this stuff. But I love it. I find it relaxing. I can work. I work to it. The tempo of modern drum and bass is about 174, 175 beats per minute. And so I'm a distance runner, and that's for my height. I found that if I run to that beat for my stride, I can run a 10-minute mile like forever, as long as I have a mix.
It's so much easier when you're running on the beat. Yeah, I've noticed that too.
On the beat. Yep. So I'll get like 1-2 hour mixes of drum and bass music, and it's the perfect tempo, and I can just go. And so now I just listen to it more. I start to think about like, as I get older, is this like my dad, where he got really obsessed with going back and listening to old like classic rock music, And now I'm getting older and all I want to do is listen to 90s rave music.
Yeah, except our stuff is cool. That's the difference.
Yeah, it's way cooler, right?
I'm sure they thought the same thing when they were growing up too. But
oh, I appreciate that.
All right, well, speaking of cool, let's get into our next track of the night, and then maybe we can talk a little bit about some of the defining characteristics of drum and bass when we come back. So my first track is from a game called Tetris Splash, and this came out, it was an Xbox Live Arcade game, which came out in 2007. This is Insanely Fast. That's the name of the song, Insanely Fast. Speaking of 170 beats per minute. Unknown composer, we haven't been able to find an artist on this one. I'd like to, though.
Yeah, me too.
Let's give it a listen, and hopefully, maybe by the time the podcast is released, we'll have a name to associate with it. All right, let's hit it.
Let's go.
All right, that was Insanely Fast from Tetris Splash, the Xbox 360 game, released in 2007, composed by an unknown artist. This isn't the first time we've had an Electronic Arts Tetris game with an unknown composer. They really don't like crediting their composers on their games, unfortunately.
That is an absolute shame, because this is an absolute jam.
Isn't it?
This is what I love about drum and bass. Like when we get into the 2000s, this is what I love about it.
Yeah, I feel like it's a really good compliment to your first track, because this is like the lighter, more rainbowy side of drum and bass. It's not the back alley people fighting each other side of drum and bass.
Oh, I know. You don't feel like Akuma's going to leap out from a tree and like tear your head off, but like this with a nice Rhodes organ going on, and there's really dope drum fills.
Yeah. And I feel like you can start to get a picture of some of the tropes of drum and bass too. So we've got that same kind of breakbeat backing beat, except it's a lot more clean in this track compared to Street Fighter Third Strike. And just that warm, huge bass sound.
Yes.
One of the trademark sounds of drum and bass. I mean, obviously we're talking about drums and bass being the trademark sounds of drum and bass, but this is the particular sound that the two of them together create. And so, I mean, this came out in 2007, so is this more like, it's almost a decade after Street Fighter 3 came out, so is this more contemporary with what drum and bass sounded like at that point?
Oh, 100%, right. So around 2007, I would say, is when like the jazzier influences really started to take hold. Like a lot of the subgenres really started to deviate from each other. So like a lot of the heavier stuff, like Pendulum and stuff like that, that was coming out in like 2005, 2006.
Yeah.
Over on Australia, they were like, let's mix heavy metal and drum and bass. And in parts of the UK, there's groups like London Electricity, and they were like, we want to infuse as much jazzy influences with drum and bass as possible. This is also a really good example of what's now known as liquid drum and bass, or just liquid music.
Okay.
Where the beats now are more, it's not chopped up as much. There's still fills, but it's more, they call it a two-step, where it's boom, bap, boom, bap.
Right, and that's Pendulum, like through and through. Every one of their songs has that beat.
100%. It's always a boom bap at that speed, and then at the same time, there's that bass. There's no breaks in the bass. There's no like distinct notes in the bass. It just rolls up and it rolls down. It rolls up and it rolls down, and it's kind of hypnotic, and that's like the signature sound of liquid drum and bass music.
Cool. Yes. You see, I'm learning a lot through you. Like I really love the genre, but I've never done the research. I didn't have that kind of background, like getting into it like you did. Mine was more like, what music sounds like the music that I'm trying to hear more of, and so I don't know. It just never dawned on me that I could like go online and research this particular brand. I did that with industrial music, but
sure.
For drum and bass, I don't know. For some reason, I just felt like I would just wait until it came to me instead of I went to them. So,
well, drum and bass is kind of making a little bit of a resurgence in pop music now. You're seeing it more in the charts. You're seeing more remixes in that style. You're seeing a lot of pop songs now are getting away from like this slow tempos of like 110, 120. They're getting back up again, and people are getting more interested in this kind of stuff. Dubstep, I feel like. A dubstep has kind of those other subgenres like drum step or whatever it's called,
yep.
Where it's like, let's get these crazy, super heavy, aggressive like dubstep of that genre sounds with the speed of drum and bass, but maybe in a half tempo. In half tempo, I can still mix it with something the same, just as fast.
Sure, so, yeah, it ends up fitting very well. And I don't know, dubstep kind of created a resurgence of people that were interested in techno and dance and EDM.
Yes.
And so a lot of the people that kind of now, I mean, dubstep has been out for so long that kids have actually started turning into teenagers and young adults listening to dubstep. And I think that's a part of the reason why this resurgence is happening, because everything blew up so big. Now we're seeing more of that, where it was like a lot of grunge and like new metal and stuff, a couple decades ago, and now we're kind of back on that swing again. Like everybody called dubstep the new disco, but that also opened up a whole bunch of new genres like new wave and synth pop and all that stuff. So now dubstep's doing the same thing, and it's splintering off into all these different electronic brands that you can sample, and there's so much out there right now that you're going to find something that you appreciate, even if you're not a huge electronic music fan.
Well, the way you're able to consume like culture now, the way you're able to consume music and popular culture is so different now than even when it was 5 years ago. And the norm of it now is completely different too. So like in the 2000s and even in the 90s and the 2000s, even the early 2000s, like prior to 2010, like sure we had YouTube and things were still running, but they were still in their infancy, and people were still turning to MTV. People were still turning to the radio for, you know, what I'm going to listen to today. Nowadays, I feel there's fewer sets of like, this is the one popular genre. Like if you listen to some certain kinds of music, you'll find tons of it.
Yeah.
You know, it's just everything is so accessible to everyone. And for creative people, producers, you need the barrier of entry to become a producer. The barrier of entry to be creative is so much lower. And I think that's a wonderful thing.
And I also think that people's musical tastes are becoming more and more defined by computer algorithms, because, you know, you listen to a drum and bass song that you really like on SoundCloud, and it's automatically going to recommend to you 3 or 4 different artists that sound similar to that without being a personal recommendation. It's just
that's true.
SoundCloud analyzing the kind of music and the BPMs and the tags it might have, and then you're going to find other things that a computer says you might like, and
but
chances are you'll find something.
Style. Ed, that is why video game music is so much more important now, because you can be playing a game and enjoying the music of a style or a genre that you would have never looked on your own.
Yes.
You know, it's like a personal DJ that is like, hey, you might like this classical track, you know, or hey, you know, this is ska, but you might dig this ska.
And you're going to be forced to listen to it until you like it, because you're going to be playing the game so much.
Exactly.
And also, we're not computer algorithms, we're the real humans here telling you which video game music tracks you should listen to. So, speaking of that, what do you have next on your drum and bass list today?
All right, so we're going to go into a more recent game, I think. This is SimCity 4 for the PC, and this is a track called Street Sweeper. And it looks like you found the right composer on this one. His name is Mark Russo, is that right?
Yeah, that's the dude.
Awesome, cool. So this is Street Sweeper for SimCity 4. All right, you're listening to Street Sweeper from the game SimCity 4, composed by Mark Russo for the PC. Yeah, this is a smooth number. Those marimbas or xylophones or whatever, those things get me, man. I love this.
Yeah, and the horn sections are great too. We were talking a little bit while I was playing. I feel like there's a lot of acid jazz in here, some very, very jazzy elements.
Yes.
Especially that marimba and the horn. And the bass just sounds like an upright bass, and it doesn't have that it doesn't have as much of a rolling sound as the last two tracks. It's a little more, you can hear the individual doom, 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 doom,
it's like
doom.
It's on like an octave kind of thing, where it's like boom, 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 which is
very classic.
It's very, very classic, but it works incredibly well. And that sound has been used a whole lot. Like that style of sound has been used a whole lot in the very jazzy drum and bass tracks of this time. So very apropos of that era.
Agreed. And there were a whole bunch of composers on this game.
Yes.
And the soundtrack had a lot of drum and bass and different kind of contemporary electronic music, which was interesting because for SimCity, normally you get very themed songs. Like at least I remember like SimCity 2, SimCity 3, you'd hear like little jingles of like if it was like a Little Italy section of the city or whatever, you'd hear like little Italian accordion floating in and out. But this I think was the first SimCity to really have like huge theme songs like this one did. So they made some really interesting choices with their soundtrack on this game.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, I looked up a little bit on Mark Russo, and yeah, he's done a lot of work on film and on television. And just about every SimCity game in existence, he's had his hand in. Even those ones where it was like SimCopter, or like with the one where you can drive your car through your SimCity.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
I remember being like hearing about. I never got a chance to play that, but hearing about that, thinking that was like one of the coolest ideas. Like they should keep doing stuff like that. But I guess nowadays, like creating our own virtual worlds is sort of like, sure, we do that all the time. That's just Minecraft or whatever.
Exactly. Just mod Grand Theft Auto. Make your own cities. Yeah, I really like this. I really, it feels kind of in the middle of our first two tracks. It doesn't necessarily have that breakneck pace of insanely fast, but it's not as like dirty. It's more on the cleaner side from
it is
from insanely fast. So
well, it is. It's kind of in between 1999 and 2007. So 2003 is when that real chill jazzy sound was becoming more and more popular. And so if you want to hear more of this type of sound, around 2003 or 2002, his name was Ronnie Size. He has a song called Brown Paper Bag, which is one of the funkiest drum and bass songs like ever recorded. And it's got a great rap lyric to it. The music video is so 90s. It's really fun.
You said the magic F word, funk. You immediately got my attention with that.
It is fun and funky. And that upright bass, it's so distinctive. It's really, really fun to listen to. You first started hearing drum and bass in video games?
More like the compilations that I was buying, trying to find more music like Ridge Racer. So
I see. Oh, okay.
And it's one of those where I would just listen to the compilations in the car, and I would know the songs by heart, but I never really took the time to like look at the back of the CD and like match up the artists and look for more, because there wasn't an internet. Like I said, it was pretty early on, so I knew the artists' names on the back of the disc, but I didn't really have any way to try and find more music from them, which was unfortunate.
Which made it even more difficult was like a lot of these artists were only releasing singles, and like usually like LPs or not just LPs, but like, vinyl singles for DJs or for record shops, and that was it. So it was really hard to go out and be like, oh, I like this song, here's that artist. I'm never going to find this at like, Rainbow Records or, that is terrible. I can't think of bookstore names right now.
Like Barnes & Noble or Walden Books or...
Yeah, Barnes &
Borders?
Noble. Well, Borders. Oh my God, yeah, Borders.
I would kind of look for like record labels. So some of the compilations I got were on Cleopatra, which also had a lot of industrial music on it. So
yeah, there's some crossover there.
I would kind of focus on some of the stuff. Yeah, exactly. And sometimes you would get artists that kind of like bridge the line between techno and industrial, which was great because I really appreciated those too. So
yeah, I was also buying a lot of those like techno compilations, ones where it was like introductions to like different techno and trance, and then some other ones that had like a GOA, I think it was called Goa music.
Okay, that's new to me. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's just what they called the CD because it was like techno that was coming out of Goa at the time.
Okay.
But I really started to hear more drum and bass in games because of the games Wipeout. So Wipeout Excel had music from not just like the Prodigy, they also had music from Source Direct and Photech and all of these like really early pioneering drum and bass artists that were doing insane stuff with samplers and with synthesizers at the time.
Fluke and Underworld and all those amazing bands.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
Future Sound of London.
Yes, Future Sound of London. Like Wipeout, the game Wipeout really like affected my taste in music for the rest of my life after that.
I'm right there with you. Same with me.
It's insane how much I can go back and be like, oh, that's why I listen to this. That's even like a lot of the trance music. Sasha's song Expander. I can hear that today and it still gives me goosebumps. It's it's like stupid how good that song is. And it's just that sound, like he's just is able to make that sound. But yeah, there's so much drum and bass in those early games, those early Wipeout games. And so when I see that they're getting re-released like on PS4 and like I don't see those artists or the soundtracks on it, I'm just not going to buy it.
Yeah, it's a shame. I mean, the music that's on there is probably good, but it's not going to hold that kind of nostalgia that we have for the original soundtracks on those Wipeout titles.
Sure. But yeah, that's what really like that's a place where I really started to see the artist names and wanted to search more of it, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah. So let's move on to our next track. This is a game that I actually played a track from before. I think the Dyad recommended a song for our winter episode, and I really liked it, and I really liked the entire soundtrack, so I wanted to share more from it. This is Some Bazaar from Xanac Cross Xanac, which came out on the PlayStation in 2001, composed by Daisuke Nagata and Masatomo Miyamoto and Katsumi Tanaka. All right, that was Some Bazaar from Xanac Cross Xanac, the PlayStation 1 2001 release, composed by Daisuke Nagata, Masatomo Miyamoto, and Katsumi Tataka. This is breakbeat polyphony going absolutely insane. Lots of jungly beats.
Oh yeah,
in this one.
Yeah. This is definitely got that old school like hardcore sound where it's going 4/4. There's no two-step beat going on here. It's just chopped up breaks, driving beats and that crazy like beepy bleepy synth sound that made me think it was from Robotron X for the N64. Like, I love that soundtrack because it's just ridiculously, it's just so fast and stupid fun. And this feels like it's in between those two places.
I totally agree with you there. And Robotron X has a little more of a retro sound combined with those, kind of trippy beats. And this one's a little more modern feeling, but it's a remake of the original Xanac. I think we talked about that a little bit on our winter episode when we introduced the game. But I just love this soundtrack. I mean, from front to back, it's got some amazing techno songs. It doesn't necessarily stay in the breakbeat drum and bass genre. There's some trance in there. There's a whole bunch of different cool stuff, and it's definitely worth a listen to.
Oh, interesting. I wonder if, because you listed 3 composers, I wonder if they like divided up duties depending on like the genre or the sound.
That's a good question.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. There was never at least to my knowledge, there was never an official soundtrack released, which is strange because with music of this quality, usually you'll see some sort of a CD OST come out. But the only way I could get this music was by, getting it directly from the game's music files.
Oh, wow.
Fortunately, they encoded it at a pretty high bit rate, so you still get that bass and you still get that crisp high end. Because a lot of those old PlayStation games with streaming audio, it's like crunchy stuff.
Oh, they would crush the heck out of it just to get it on there. I know.
Yeah.
Well, not only that, like this is 2001, like samplers at the time, they were pretty good, but they were so expensive.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, the barrier of entry to produce your own electronic music is so much lower now because the computers we carry in our pockets and our phones are so much more powerful than the machines we were using to create music back in like the early 2000s and in the late 90s.
Yeah, back then you couldn't do multiple channels of high bitrate sound. You'd have to do a couple channels and then bounce it to one and then do another couple channels and then mix them all together. And now you can have 20, 30, 40 channels going at the same time. And
it's crazy. There's a lot of crossover to the demo scene and tracker music because they would, as you would know, they would take those samples and they would crush them or make them smaller to save on the file size and then put them into their samplers. And even then they would crush them down or convert things to mono just to put as much space as possible into these little samplers.
Right. And unless you were using basic sine waves, those samples would get super, super crunched. And sound like Genesis sound effects, basically.
Yeah, 2001 was when I was starting to get more interested in music production. I was playing with trackers in the 90s, and then in 2001 was when I started getting more into DJing, turntables, and I had a lot of drum machines and samplers of my own. And so I was reaching those limitations. And something about having those limitations and having to work around them, it forces you to be more creative with different sounds. So like instead of like sampling 4 bars, like 4 full bars of a drum break of someone actually drumming, you're ending up taking just the kick drum from here and the snare drum from there and rearranging them in different ways. And you end up with some crazy rhythms. Something like we're hearing with this Xanax cross Xanax.
Yeah, Zantac cross Zantac. You're not going to have any acid reflux with that.
Zantac. I love that it's called Some Bizarre because it's pretty wild. This is pretty wild.
My first introduction to music making was Acid Studio, which was I was really into like Fatboy Slim and the Chemical Brothers and that big beat stuff where they would basically make all their music from huge samples. So this is when computers were a little more powerful and able to do multi-tracking.
Oh yeah.
And they didn't work on keyboards that much. They would sample a violin stab from one song and then take a full drum loop from another song and a bass from a third song and then layer them together and then put effects on them. So everything that you were listening to was, you could have one song that was made up of samples from 17 other songs. You might not ever know where it came from. And it was all these kind of like manipulated and sequenced samples together. So that's what I would do. And I would I would grab CDs, convert them to wave, chop little parts out of a drum and bass song, or chop a little piece out of like, I remember I used to use like Silent Hill beats and then put like Street Fighter 2 stuff over
that's
it.
Great. Yeah.
And try to make songs like that. And I feel like a lot of this stuff, especially those breakbeats, are very familiar with like what I used to do. And trying to recreate breakbeats was like so complicated because you had to like chop up different things in different ways and put them before and after each other. And there's no real easy way to do it with limited computer capabilities. You really need something powerful to be able to create that stuff.
Oh yeah, the layering of sounds. You need to be able to play all of these different things at the same time, and not just play them, but arrange them at the same way too. So oftentimes you wouldn't have a way to actually trigger all of the playback of all of these sounds in a live setting. So you have to have a sequencer to play back all of these things that controls all of these other pieces of hardware. It becomes a really big, complicated process, but it's very rewarding when it all fits together.
Sure, especially when you got a whole bunch of bodies dancing to your tunes on the club. That's reward right there.
Yeah, I really like the sound like this. Like in my mind, I can really picture like really heavy, like super aggressively pulsating strobe lights, you know?
Yes.
And like people like screaming and like throwing like glow sticks in the air. Like, I know, like I'm almost 40, but whatever, man. That stuff still gets me going.
Go for it. like that ridiculously out of place dance scene from like The Matrix 2, where everybody's just grinding against each other, and you're like, "This is the apocalypse. What are you doing?"
Oh my god. There's a show out right now on Netflix. I know I'm dating the episode, but it's called The Umbrella Academy. And
I love that show.
I haven't finished it yet, but there's a scene where one of the characters, like he gives up and he goes out and he does drugs and goes to this club, and that club is so 90s rave. It's the best. And I love that whole scene. It's so cool.
And he's just like, I love this, and he's barely coherent.
I know, but it's got the colors, it's got like the sounds, it's got the really intense strobe lights. It's just so cool. Like, I feel like rave music at that time and the whole like idea of the rave culture was all, I mean, of course, obviously, you know, drugs were heavily influencing the whole thing, but it's all about like going in there and just having fun. And like the music, it was called trance because it was just forcing you into this state of like, you know, just trance-like state.
Hypnotic, yeah, exactly.
Hypnotic, exactly, yeah. We just like it. We just like it, man.
We just like it. It's just good. Can't really explain why, except we're trying for 2 hours here on our show. So we've talked, or at least I've talked a bit about Ridge Racer music and how it got me into techno. So I'm super excited for your next track. What do we got?
Oh yeah. We're going into Ridge Racer Type 4 for the Sony PlayStation, composed by Tetsukazu Nakanishi, and this is his track Lucid Rhythms.
Rev those engines.
Let's do it. Lucid Rhythms from Ridge Racer Type 4 for the Sony PlayStation, composed by Tetsukazu Nakanishi. Ooh, man, we got those crazy drum fills, but this time, all of those drum fills are being filtered up and it's being filtered down, and it's all being kind of crisscrossed together with all of those crazy like organ sounds and that piano, those piano lines towards the end. It takes me back, man. This takes me back to Ridge Racer.
This is one of those audio Xanax tracks. It puts me in such a calm, stress-free mood.
Yeah.
We were talking before, this is the music that plays during like your car selection screen before you start racing. And as a design choice in a game, it's really interesting because this is not getting you hyped up for the race. You know, like the original Ridge Racer game, when you start, it's like Ridge Racer, and you got this like really bouncy, like energetic music that's getting you pumped up to get out on the track. And this is like, hey man, just chill out, you know? You don't need to go racing just yet. Just take a look at these polygonal cars spinning on the screen for a little while.
Well, so much of Ridge Racer, Ridge Racer 4, Ridge Racer Type 4 had like a story mode where you can play as different teams from around the world.
Right.
And so there was so much more music to accompany like choosing your car and putting your team together and choosing the next track you were going to race on.
You can even choose like your logo and your like colors and stuff. There was a lot of design elements in this one.
A lot of cool stuff. This whole game looked like the whole presentation of this game was really amazing. This is one of the, like, I think it's probably the first racing game that caught my attention because I've never really been a big car guy, but I like competitive games, and so racing is a big competitive thing. And of course, like the presentation of this game with the colors and with the characters and with the cars, and then when I first heard the music, it was just over. Like this was just going to be it.
Right.
So
yeah,
I played through this entirely at least twice when I rented it.
I think I just owned it. I was so into Ridge Racer that I would just either ask for the game for Christmas or buy it myself or whatever, you know, at whatever stage of my life. It was just like, there's a Ridge Racer game out, I'm buying it, end of story.
Nice.
I do remember being disappointed originally that all of the games up to this point, so Ridge Racer 2, and Rage Racer on the PlayStation, and it was all Redbook audio, so you could take the discs out, throw them in your CD player, and, you know, just play it. I can convert it to tape and put it on my Walkman, whatever.
Yeah.
This was the first game that had so much music on it that they had to compress it into streaming audio. So I remember trying to put the disc in my CD player, and the music was not there. And I was like, no, how am I going to get these songs? Because they're so good. And fortunately, they did release a retail CD of the music in Japan, so the music eventually came out over the web, and we were able to get a good CD quality version of the tunes. But until then, I was like, oh, now I got to deal with all this compressed, crappy music.
Yeah, this music is now like legendary. Like people, if there's someone who's into video game music or you know they're fans of it or they enjoy it, like Ridge Racer is definitely in there. It's in their lexicon somewhere. Like there's at least a song from this game that like hits them, and for me, it's this song. This song gets me every time.
I feel like this is also maybe a good first example of somebody creating drum and bass music who's also probably maybe a skilled composer. There's a lot of melody in this. It's a lot more than just a lot of repeating patterns. Not to say that music is bad at all. I mean, people come up with amazing beats, but there's a lot more traditional musicality in this song than some of the stuff we've listened to before.
Yes. So that's another big evolution in the drum and bass genre, right? So in the 90s and the early 2000s, electronic music, part of it I would say is influenced by the rave culture being very repetitive, and part of it is also probably influenced by the hardware it was being created on, where you couldn't have a lot of variation. There wasn't a whole lot you could do with it, keep changing the sound and adding things on top of it. So the music was very, very repetitive. As we get into the mid to later 2000s that we're on today, the style of the music, also the length of the music has changed completely to where I think more skilled composers, more composers with pop music sensibilities start doing their own spin on the genre, where it's still, you know, you still have an intro, you still have a drop, you still have maybe a verse chorus, or maybe just like a main section and then like a breakdown and another drop. Like it's still those elements of dance music, but it's a lot more condensed and there's a lot more melody, there's a lot more harmony in going along with those beats. And you see that a lot more now than you did back then. back then, if you heard something like this, I was like, when I heard this in Ridge Racer, I was like, oh my God, there's a piano melody that's changing and evolving with the drum and bass music. It was it just wasn't happening everywhere. I don't know if it was the limitations or if it was just the time, but it's just something that sort of kept growing and growing and growing. And for someone who doesn't listen to a lot of electronic music, I'm sure they're like, oh my God, you had to wait 15 years before you got a melody in your song. But like, it wasn't always about that,
Well, I think you're right on both counts. I think it's easier to do live performances in the studio over the beats that you've made now and record it and have that be a song. But I think it's also the audience. Raves aren't as big as they used to be. There are a lot more people that are listening to this music because they want to sit down and focus on it and enjoy it, and less so just, I want something with a strong bass that I can dance all night to. And so composers know that they're creating music that needs to be a little more dynamic and is going to keep your attention over a longer period of time without flashing lights and the influence of maybe some substances here and there.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that's why I really like the stuff, and especially the stuff on the R4 soundtrack, because it's
so great.
It's dance music, but it's made to also sit down and listen to the music and appreciate it as quote unquote, actual music instead of just a dance beat that you can kind of wash the dishes to or something and keep yourself entertained.
Sure. I mean, that's another advantage of not just looking at it in hindsight, but like the way where we are today with music. Where electronic music and acoustic music and traditional like rock band music, it's all kind of melded together now. There's not so much delineation between the two. Maybe there's bands that are like, oh, there's a folk band, they're not going to hear Young the Giant do like something with like techno,
right,
or Mumford and Sons, like, suddenly throwing an 808. But there's a lot less delineation between those two things than there was at this time. So like, if you were a fan of this music, people looked at you funny because, this isn't rock music. Where's the guitar? Where's the lead singer? It's very different. It's very, very different how it is now. And I think that's a huge plus. And for the people like your sons growing up in this whole new musical world, like, they have a huge advantage, I think. They can be exposed to so much more stuff.
And it's sad that it's something we can actually thank guys like Fred Durst for melding rap and rock and getting people used to the fact that
those things can happen.
Things don't need to stay pigeonholed. You can meld rap and rock. You can meld techno and country for whatever reason you might want to do that. But it is very cool that the lines are being blurred and that and it helps people get introduced to those new genres too.
Yeah.
So
you mentioned, you were talking about how there wasn't a whole lot of performance with a lot of electronic music, which is why electronic music was really focused on the DJs. But a lot of that changed in the late 90s and early 2000s with The Prodigy. And I have to obviously bring that up now. Yeah. But like, if you watch like old performances of theirs, like especially not even just on MTV, like in their music videos, but like when they would do like live performances, it was really just them hitting play. And then of course the guy going crazy and just banging his head up and down, because he needed a focus.
Right.
Someone needed to be like, oh, that's a band. That's the front man. That's the whole thing going on. But there just wasn't possible. Someone's hitting play on a computer. Someone's hitting play on a CD player and just like, okay, let's go nuts.
Yeah. You need to have some sort of stage presence to keep the audience. Well, even if your music is good, you still need a visual aesthetic to make you stand out from the rest of the people that are doing music in the same space as you are.
And I was thinking of that too, because there's a huge connection between that, like those old performances, and chiptune artists today, where like amazing composers doing crazy, super aggressive, awesome techno stuff on just a single Game Boy. Hard to perform on a Game Boy when you're just sort of playing back on it. So it's the same thing. You're hitting play on the Game Boy, you're holding it in the air, but you're running around and screaming and like waving it in the air.
Yeah.
Just sort of not pretending that you're the artist, but just trying to get everyone involved. It's more of a performance.
Yeah, and that's another thing that the Prodigy really helped pave my way into the electronica scene of that time too. I remember seeing like Firestarter on MTV after getting home from high school, doing my homework, and I'm like, oh my god, these guys are amazing. And as we're recording this, they just did announce that Keith Flint, one of the singers and dancers in Prodigy, had just passed away, and I was like, like celebrity deaths don't normally affect me that much, but man, I really felt that because I'm like one of those guys that like runs out or downloads a Prodigy album as soon as it comes out. I love them so much.
Invaders Must Die, when that came out,
so
that was
good.
So good. Like, and it was like, and their sound was still Prodigy. It was still aggressive and punk rock and electronic, but it was also still them. It still had like them evolved. It was, I don't know. It was just such a perfect meld of the old and the new. But if you ask people who the Prodigy is, like especially in America, like they talk about that guy,
right?
Like because he was the face of everything, you know. So and for that's just amazing.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens going forward with them. I don't know. I don't want to get too into that because it's kind of a downer. But
it is kind of a downer. I think they did some recordings. I think so. There might be a kind of a post-mortem album, or at least some tracks.
Well, that would be a nice tribute. Very cool.
I would really look forward to that. So we can hope for that. But let's keep going.
Yeah, exactly. So let's get back into the music. Whose turn is it? Is it me? Do I go?
Yeah,
I think
it's
so.
You. Yeah, you hear Ridge Racer and you're like, oh, that's mine.
Oh, that's right, Ridge Racer, and I completely just lose all my brain function. It's so good. This is also another game that I've featured recently on my Marble Games episode with Logan, and we talked a little bit about Super Monkey Ball 2 and played a track from that. This one is Under the Ocean. From Super Monkey Ball 2 that came out on the GameCube and PS2 in 2002. This is composed by Hidenori Shoji. That was Under the Ocean from Super Monkey Ball 2, the 2002 GameCube and PS2 release, composed by Hidenori Shoji. And I feel like this is a good compliment to Lucid Rhythms because they both have that kind of a nice, very calming aesthetic to them. This one's maybe a little bit more on the up-tempo side from Lucid Rhythms, but I don't know, I feel like this one was not that kind of crazy breakbeaty sound that some of the other tracks we've played so far have.
Yeah, it's interesting for being a track that's actually slower, for like a slower in tempo. It sounds more upbeat because the rhythm is not as jumping around. You know, it's much more.
It's not so glitchy.
Yeah, it's not as glitchy. It's much more steady. But like the Lucid Rhythms track from Ridge Racer 4, it's got that kind of cool, like synthesizer kind of piano thing going on in the background. This one sounds kind of like a theremin, you know?
I was just going to say that, yeah.
Yeah, I like that a lot. That sounds really, really cool.
Kind of like those little house lasers, like with the little theremin in the bed. It's very like sci-fi. Like this is an underwater track. This is one of the underwater levels from Monkey Ball, and I get that feeling a bit. It seems like for multi-genre soundtracks, composers tend to go to drum and bass a lot when they do underwater levels because that bass sounds so bubbly and flowy. I think it makes people feel like they're kind of moving through molasses or in slow motion, and it complements the slower action from an underwater level a lot.
Yeah, I think you're right. When I'm looking for tracks for our podcast, I tend to look for like water stages or for menu music, because I tend to find music of this type of genre or this type of style in those areas of games. Like, oh, is this where the map plays? It's probably going to be some cool drum and bass tune, or it's going to be something a little more chill. So yeah, I tend to focus in on those areas. I know Keyglyph, on your show and on her show as well, she really likes to zone in on boss music, on the boss battle songs.
Yeah. She and I have a lot of similarities in that. I'll start with, I'll go to menu music and then I'll go to boss music to kind of get that. Okay, here's what the non-action, very calm music sounds like. How frenetic and stupid can this music get in the boss music? And then, based on that, I can tell whether it's a soundtrack worth listening to or not. How extreme those two different and competently made are those two different kinds of songs.
Right.
But yeah, you're right. The underwater music, like we said, is very drum and bass. A lot of times, like a level 1 or like a cutscene dialogue music, you'll get some drum and bass leanings as well. It's used a lot for kind of stationary or slow moving parts of games, and I like that because it helps you concentrate a little more on the music when it's playing too. There's not so much craziness going on screen.
Yeah. They decide like, okay, this is going to be that slow, repetitive track where there's not going to be something where you're trying to create. You're not trying to add to the emotion of a level that you're playing through. Maybe action happening on this stage or a drama happening in this part of the game. It's like, oh, you're at a menu, so let's do something a little bit more even.
Yeah, for sure.
So at this point, I should probably start talking a little bit more about why it's called drum and bass before we keep going forward, because we've talked about jungle music, and we've talked about some other genres and subgenres, but we've been calling it drum and bass.
I always felt like it was just obvious. There's like a big focus on drums and bass, but is there more?
Well, yeah. So, and I kind of didn't realize this until today, and it all makes sense now. So, like, my brother-in-law Raj, he was like, "Oh, what do you do?" And I was like, "Oh, I DJ. I play drum and bass music." And he's like, "Oh, yeah, I play drums and I play bass. We should play sometime." And I'm like, "Oh, wait, no, it's not." Something different.
Right.
So the term drum and bass was sometimes used in the 70s as a name of dub versions of reggae songs. So if you think about like in the 70s and the 80s and even in the 90s, like hip hop tracks and reggae tracks, when they were released on vinyl, oftentimes on the B-sides of those vinyl would be dub versions of the song, which are versions of the song usually without vocals and maybe remixed a little bit with more rhythm. And that's so for DJs can either, mix in from another song, like maybe a taste of it, or they can have an MC or a vocalist on there with him doing the vocals for the track without the track having its own vocals.
That's really cool.
So they would call it, instead of the dub version of the song, they would call it the drum and bass version of the song, because that's what it is. It's the drum and the bass. So that makes a lot of sense, since the style, the genre of drum and bass really came out of that sound. The roots of drum and bass they go back to jungle, which is mainly came out of the whole reggae scene, or they call it the raga style. So if you ever hear drum and bass music where there's some kind of like reggae guy rapping super fast and makes absolutely no sense, that's called raga, and it's like it's still really popular. I never really got into it, but because of the influences of reggae into drum and bass, we still have huge drum and bass raves, but you saw like one MC shouting over every single track, because that's just like the culture of it. That's just what they do. I found that really interesting. That's why it's called drum and bass. It wasn't until like 95 or 96 when they started to move away from doing that style, that raga style. They needed a way to differentiate itself. Okay. Right? So they were like, oh, well, if you call this jungle music, people are going to expect a weird reggae track, so I can't sell it like this, because now we have organs and we have pianos and that upright bass. We can't just call it jungle anymore. Yeah. So they started calling it drum and bass, because that's what it was. It was just a track without vocals, and it wasn't going to be raga anymore. So nowadays, those terms are like almost interchangeable. Like people just use them back and forth, and what you call one over the other can be debated forever. But I thought that was really interesting where the term drum and bass came from.
That is really interesting, and it's also neat that dubstep came from reggae too originally.
Yes, huge roots,
so
huge roots.
It makes a lot of sense that there are a lot of similarities, and how drum and bass and dubstep kind of started melding back together. It's almost like two branches splitting apart and then slowly kind of finding their way back to one another. But it's also why they fit so well together, because they both have that same kind of Caribbean cadence to them that really helps them meld.
Yes, and it makes sense they came from the UK because of that huge like Afro-Caribbean culture. All those people that migrated into the UK, like they brought their music with them, and then it starts to merge into newer dance music, like dubstep and drum and bass. It does have those kind of Caribbean, Afro-Caribbean influences to it, but it's so British. Like it is British music, it didn't come from Europe into the UK. It didn't come from America into the UK. Like it originated from there. So it's very unique to their kind of ecosystem.
Awesome. And yet it proliferated all over the world pretty quickly. So that's really cool.
Oh yeah, really did.
So what you got for your last pick today?
Okay, this is from the game Klonoa. I think everyone loves little Klonoa.
I've heard of Klonoa.
This is called Beats from Above, and it's composed by Tetsukazu Nakanishi. Again, actually, he was the same composer on Ridge Racer Type 4.
That's right. All right, let's hit it.
This is Beats from Above from the game Klonoa for the Sony PlayStation, composed by Tetsukazu Nakanishi. And yeah, again, it's a little bit slower, but very clearly drum and bass with those cut up break beats and those really smooth synth lines. Again, it's got that Nakanishi sound, very similar to Ridge Racer Type 4. What do you think, Dad?
Yeah, I like the combination of the kind of halftime beat where it's got that drum and bass sound, but it doesn't sound so much like the stuff that we've played. But then those real break beats just kind of come in for that hook and just brings the whole song together. It's funny how different the instrumentation over that feels with that double time drum kit versus the halftime drum kit. It just makes everything sound so much like the puzzle pieces finally all come together when those beats come in.
They absolutely do. The drum sounds used, like, because everything sounds kind of futuristic with all of those other synth sounds, but there's not a whole lot of other like drum machines going on other than those classic drum breaks. And again, these are still classic, mostly James Brown drum breaks. So this is either from his song Think or Hot Pants. So there's a lot of hi-hat going on in there, which is really, it really lends itself to being chopped up a whole lot, because it's very clean. There's not a whole lot of splash cymbals. It's very, very clicky, and you can really kind of roll that around and do a lot of variations with it and make it sound very, very different.
Yeah, and it's nice too. This is great music for like a cartoony side-scrolling platformer too, because it doesn't get in the way of the action. You know, this is a game where the colors are very vibrant. It's not the kind of music that you normally hear in like a cartoony kind of game, but Namco they love throwing interesting genres of music into their games regardless of what kind of game it is. So
yeah,
I think this is an example of them kind of experimenting with a genre that you wouldn't necessarily think of, putting in this kind of a game and having it work really well.
Yeah, Klonoa is very, very colorful. And this track almost sounds a little dark for what Klonoa is, but it's been...
Yeah.
I haven't seen the Klonoa in a really long time, and even then I was on the PlayStation 2, so this is where Purnell usually comes in and he knows everything about the games that we're talking about. Like, I just don't know. I'm just really digging this music, and I love that again, this is within the theme of drum and bass music for the show, but we've had so many different tracks exploring all these different like tempos and all these different rhythms and all these different styles of drum and bass music. Although we've been really focused in on this kind of chilled out, kind of liquid, jazzy side.
Yeah. I do. I want to learn more about Tetsukazu Nakanishi because...
Yeah, me too.
I'm interested to see if he's done anything outside of video game music. Like, I'd like to hear if he's done any drum and bass stuff just for commercial, like CD releases or anything like that. I'd like to hear him kind of unfettered by staying within a VGM kind of genre. I think that would be really nice.
Yeah, where he was just composing outside of, not the constraints of the media, but not composing for the media, not composing for these characters and these worlds. He's composing for himself, what the worlds he wants to create for himself.
Not having to worry about if Namco's going to approve and throw it on their game or not.
Yeah, absolutely. But it sounds like he really was creative, or had the opportunity to be really creative with all these different soundtracks that he worked on. So I would love to maybe dig into that. That might be, hopefully he has enough to do like a whole focus on an episode sometime, maybe of Rhythm and Pixels. That would be kind of fun.
That would be neat. I mean, there's a whole bunch of really good stuff that was put out by Namco around that PlayStation era, so that would work very well for any kind of podcast.
Oh, that's right. Theme. This is also PlayStation 1. The PlayStation 1 was just such it was like a really heady, like just optimistic time, wasn't it? Like everything was just really new. They were trying out different things. Like rhythm games were just becoming a thing with like Parappa. Resident Evil was just becoming a thing with survival horror. There was so many new things being experimented with. I think we're seeing that again now with a lot more indie developers and developers being able to distribute more freely their own games. But when the PlayStation and of course the time when we were growing up, it really made an impact on me.
Yeah, and same with music too. I mean, there was the Sega CD era, the birth of the CD-ROM Red Book Audio, where music was a little more simple and maybe a lot of like MIDI compositions just kind of burned to CD. And then, after a while, people started realizing how important music was. I mean, it was always noted as being an important thing, but how important quality CD audio was, and how it just can't be rock music over a Genesis game, and regardless of the genre or sound, it's going to be good because it's CD quality. No, they started, and Namco especially, really started putting out extreme quality electronic music along with their games, and really kind of focusing on that music in terms of enhancing the gameplay experience.
And not just the home consoles too, because Namco has such a huge arcade presence, and that's something that me and Purnell talk about a lot too, because I was influenced a lot by the arcade music because of how long I worked in arcades.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But his argument, and it's super valid, is that you can never hear it that clearly Like, unless you were there all day long hearing that same tune from Top Skater, like, you're not going to hear it all the time, or you're just going to walk by and be like, that's not music, really. All I hear is sound effects and, noise of change machines.
Yeah. Well, funny enough, I've been talking about Ridge Racer this whole episode, but one of the first things before it even came out on the PlayStation, which was it was the launch title I got with my PlayStation, but because when you sat down in a Ridge Racer arcade cabinet, the more deluxe versions of the cabinets had speakers on the chair right next to your ears.
Loved it. Loved that stuff.
So if the volume was up high enough, man, that's all you heard when you were racing. And it was just this pumping techno with the roar of the engine. And it was like there was nothing else in the building except you and that game cabinet when you were playing it. And I loved it so much.
Yeah, they really create that experience. And now this is where you and I differ, but they did the same thing with the Daytona USA too. And that music, it gets my goosebumps going just as much as this stuff does. And I think that's purely just it's half nostalgia. The other half is just fun. I love it.
Is it the opposite of goosebumps? Because that's what I get when I listen to Daytona's soundtrack. My skin goes inward instead of outward. I don't know. Can you do that?
I'm imagining like a balloon getting sucked in. I'm like, you turn Daytona on and. Where'd that go? He
it's just implosion.
Yeah,
right.
This is a cool song.
All right, well, let's listen to some music I actually do like. How's that?
All right, okay.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
So this is kind of the branch of drum and bass that I'm very familiar with. This is more of the drum step. Pendulum, Flux Pavilion
I'm
branch.
really, really happy that you were able to find some more music in this style, the more modern style, so we can showcase just everything up until today.
And it's also from one of my favorite games, too, so I'm really happy to share it. This is from a game called Trials Fusion. This is the theme song to the game called Welcome to the Future, and this is composed by Petri Alanko. right, welcome back from the future. That was Welcome to the Future from Trials Fusion. That was a 2014 game released on PC and PS4 and composed and sung by Petri Alanko. Not so much traditional drum and bass, but this is very indicative of drum step and that kind of fusion of dubstep and drum and bass. Such an original name they made as a portmanteau of the two genres, but you get that boom ba, that kind of beat that you were talking about at the beginning of the show, and that really super. It's like a dubstep bass, but in the style of drum and bass. So it's that very kind of grindy, warbly sound over the whole thing. This hits a lot of those kind of tropes that drum step uses.
Yeah, it's really nice to hear an example of this now in game music, because this is. Like all of these genres have now influenced each other, right? So again, this is just half the tempo of what we have been listening to.
Right.
So it sounds extra slower, but it still has that two-step kind of beat to it. And so it would still be considered in that drum and bass space, but this doesn't have any drum breaks in it at all. Like these are, drum samples or drum hits or live drummers, just really, really, really heavy. And this really started becoming popular around the time of 2005, 2006 with artists like Pendulum that we talked about. You said Flux Pavilion. Those are like suddenly these super heavy hitting songs started to differentiate themselves into another genre. And although that jazzy style of drum and bass, all those breaks it's still being created today and it's still very popular. Like this has its own space now. And it's really kind of this is the kind of sound that's gotten into the pop music kind of scene.
Yeah, for sure. So like you were talking about, I think Pendulum was one of the kind of like the pioneers of this genre, and it was you guys were just talking about Skrillex on your Kingdom Hearts episode a couple weeks ago. Skrillex kind of really brought that whole drum step and dubstep sound into the forefront, and guys like Rob Swire from Pendulum were doing traditional drum and bass music, but he had also had a background in metal and rock with bands from his childhood. So
just like Skrillex, Skrillex had that background with like his emo rock or whatever, and kind of blended what he knew of that with the techno and drum and bass that he knew to make something completely different.
Exactly. And so when Pendulum came to the forefront, they started blending live guitars with a lot of the drum and bass and dubstep elements, and then that just completely blew up because people who liked both genres were suddenly kind of converging over this music. And it was great, and it's been influential on video game music like this. Pendulum has appeared in a lot of video games as well, like MotorStorm on the PlayStation.
MotorStorm.
Noisia, who did a lot of music in that genre, ended up doing the MotorStorm sequel. So Sony and the PlayStation brand really kind of grabbed onto this drum step, dubstep sound and added it to a lot of their games, which in turn brought it to a whole new generation of gamers and people that normally might not have heard it, just like Ridge Racer did for me. So it was really cool.
Right. So if our listeners are into this style of music or into this more of this kind of sound than the other ones, definitely Pendulum, Noisia. Maybe not so much Noisia. Noisia kind of went off into their own insane style of drum and bass, which later then became the genre later became called neurofunk, like Neuro funk, which is nothing really funky about it except that the beats are usually like really heavily shuffled. So like it sounds like a really, really kind of, it almost sounds faster than normal drum and bass, though we're still at the same tempo. And like the bass and the synthesizers are super, super heavy and like weirdly filtered into something like the bass you would hear in this type of sound here. And then as they kind of evolved and with their own sound, I mean, they're still making music today. They've gotten into the more heavy beats too. But with Pendulum, you can hear on their early albums, like their very first album was on Breakbeat Chaos, which is DJ Fresh's record label. Who's an amazing drum and bass artist in his own right, but most of the music on there was very, very focused on drum and bass, breakbeat, and like kind of that dance techno-y sound. But then every album they did after that got further and further and further into electronic music with metal, heavy metal, to the point where there's a song called Self versus Self where they have Slayer on the track with them. And I'm not a big metal guy, but that song just rules.
It blows the doors off.
It does. That's you can say what you want about metal and techno and everything. When you put those two things together into that song, it's crazy good. It's so
absolutely. And then so they kind of backed off of Pendulum and started Knife Party, which was much more of that like Ibiza style hardcore dance music with much more of a dubstep sound. And now they're coming back to Pendulum again. He just needed like a little break. But other bands like like Bass Nectar is really into good drum and bass stuff, but he's more of like a multi-genre performance art kind of a thing. So he'll write music with a lot of other different artists and then have like visual like stage performances to his drum and bass music. So there's a lot of really cool artistry going on in the genre right now.
Huh. It's cool. What's interesting is a lot of these artists now I only know because of my obsession with DDR. And these artists aren't in DDR, but they're really popular with the community-driven like step chart files that you can download now. And so a lot of the music and pop music and new music that I hear about now is because I'm playing these songs from these games, and I'm like, oh yeah, I know that song. I have that on the downstairs. I play it all the time. So
very, very cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Anyway, really cool track. The vocals are kind of cheesy, but like they're cheesy in the right way in this track.
I like them. Yeah, they're the only vocals that are in the game, and you know. We were just talking a little bit about Trials Fusion. I love the Trials series. It's motorbike racing, but it's more like stunt bike racing, like getting through really challenging tracks instead of just racing around a simple dirt track. This is like the third or fourth game in the series, and this game takes place during the end of the world. So you're literally racing as like tornadoes are going around you, and meteors are dropping, and you're like just trying to outrun like chaos by the end of the game. And this was released in 2014, so like literally last week, the sequel to this game, Trials Rising, came out, and I was really, really psyched for the soundtrack. I'm like, Petri Alanko did such a great job on Fusion. I can't wait to hear. And freaking Ubisoft, they just licensed a whole bunch of really crappy music for the sequel.
Oh, that's a shame.
To the point where it's so bad that I just turned the music all the way down, and now I'm listening to like VGM in my computer collection.
Oh, really?
While I'm playing the game.
That's too
It was
bad.
really disappointing. I was really hoping that they would kind of follow this really good soundtrack up with something good.
Yeah, it's funny how like a lot of my tastes in electronic music were formed because of the licensed tracks that were in the Wipeout series of games on the PlayStation 1. But now when I see these titles with licensed tracks, I'm like, I just get disappointed because there could have been, music created for this game now, maybe more focused on the gameplay. Maybe it's just because that's what I'm focused on now.
Yeah.
Like, the last 3 or 4 years, I've been like really heavily focused on it.
And it's more jobs for video game music composers, more opportunities to further their careers, but instead they're just wasting it and paying for music that's already been made for radio, and it feels like it's not, it's not furthering the careers of the guys that we really want to promote. So
right, you're hearing a song that happens to be in this game rather than a song that was made for the game.
Yes, exactly.
To enhance the experience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's move on to some more music that was written specifically for games. We're going into our bonus round, which feels weird to say without Big P here, but
yeah, usually we get him. Usually he, on his own, makes his own little song for this time.
So in the spirit of Rhythm and Pixels, our last two picks are going to be music that's remixes or maybe a little further outside the genre of traditional VGM, right?
Right. So on Rhythm and Pixels, we have a section where it's remixes and arrangements or covers based on the theme. Not a lot of times, but sometimes we find music that could be in the game or created for the game that sort of fits outside of the scope of the gameplay. Maybe they're intro songs or
something written for like promotional material.
Yeah, anything with a lot of vocals or a lot of cool, like really sweet arranged tracks for SNK games. So for this one, there is a vocal track from Final Fantasy 13-2 for the Sony PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. This is a track called Worlds Collide. It's composed by Naoshi Misuta, and the lyrics and vocals are by David Whittaker. So it's can be a combination of vocals with a very modern drum and bass sound.
All right, we'll be right back.
paradoxes must break. This is the path I must take. My destiny may change your fate. The pain my heart feels is my strength. Collide and people fade, seeking gates through timelines we've all prayed. Let's fix the past, trade it now to see smiling faces. This hope, part of chaos, cannot take. Paradoxes must break. This is the path I must take. My destiny may change your fate. The pain my heart feels is my strength. Worlds collide and people fade, seeking gates through timelines we all prayed. Let's fix the past, trade it now to see smiling faces. This hope, part of chaos, cannot take. Paradoxes must break. This is the path I must take. My destiny may change your fate. The future to come is what we've made.
That is Worlds Collide from Final Fantasy XIII Part 2, composed by Naoshi Mitsuda, with lyrics and vocals by one David Whittaker, straight out of Atlanta, overseas into Japan, right into your Final Fantasy game.
And into your eardrums.
Yeah, if you do a little bit of looking around online about his music, so David Whittaker's rapper out of Atlanta, somehow got connected into the anime world, and I think some anime producers, they wanted some authentic American rap sounds and started bringing him in. So famously, he's on Kill la Kill, that anime. He's got some tracks on that. And he's also in Final Fantasy 13 too, and a few other games. And if you look him up online, people are pretty divided on whether they like it or they hate it.
Of course. It's
like
the internet. I mean,
yeah, but like I feel like people don't expect to hear rap music, especially in games like this. But
true.
I think it's just it's clever. You know, it's a clever introduction it's a clever introduction of new styles that you wouldn't normally see in video games.
Yeah, it's a nice change of pace. And musically speaking, I feel like this is a really good bridge between that Trials Fusion track and all of the drum and bass that we've been listening to. It's got that kind of grindy, dubsteppy bass like the Trials Fusion track did.
Oh, yeah.
But we're looking at more of those break beats that were, so heavily influenced by all the stuff that we've just listened to throughout the entire show.
It's like the culmination of all the sounds we've been hearing. And this is really like a lot of modern drum and bass is like, this is where we're at now. It's like we've taken the best of everything and melding it all together. And because we have Naoshi Mitsuda, a games composer, doing this track, you have all of these like kind of like symphonic elements building, and then that key change at the end is like you would never hear that in a club drum and bass track. It would never have a key change like that. And it's just so cool. It's unexpected and it's beautiful. It's a great song.
Yeah, I could just imagine all the dancers in the club just kind of like going, what?
Right. Yeah, and the DJ being like, how do I mix this now? Like, how did we get major? Like, what the heck?
Everything just went flat. What's going on?
Yeah, exactly. It's very, you just wouldn't see it. Usually the key stays the same through the whole track, and then there's usually just rhythm at the beginning and at the very end so that you can mix songs together more easily. So, but again, this is video game music. I mean, this is for Final Fantasy 13 2, game which I have no clue about.
Me neither. Never played it before.
No.
But really good track. I really like this one. I'm glad it's in the show. So we've been decidedly very, very modern this episode. So I figured for my remix track, I'll make it a little retro. We'll play something that I think everybody's going to be pretty familiar with. This is a track called Wicked Chip. And this is a remix, a drum and bass remix of Vampire Killer and Wicked Child from the Castlevania series. And this is composed and arranged by Jorito and Eric Vraven. All right, we are back. That was Wicked Chip by Jorito and Eric Vraven. When this track first started, I was like, oh, all right, they just took like the original track and just put a couple of like fancy drums over it. But then that first sweep came in and I was like, oh man, they totally revamped this entire song. I really, really liked it. And it just kept getting better and better as it went on. Really good stuff.
I really enjoyed that too. I like the vocals again. Like there's kind of like they kind of crept up on me because they was going through some kind of weird keyboard talk box situation.
Yeah.
But once I kept hearing it, I was like, oh, again, it's cheesy and I like it. This is really cool. I love that. Because it's like that sound is so vintage, you know, it's very retro sound, but like retro in a different way than the Game Boy and the chip sound.
Yeah, I think they based the original Castlevania tunes off of the MSX version, which is why you have a little bit more of that rich square wave sound, because it's from there.
Oh, very, very cool.
So I'll just read a little bit from the SoundCloud about how the song came to be. So Dorito says, my drummer friend Eric wanted to create a drum and bass-ish groove for Vampire Killer's Wicked Child song by using the original game song and adding live drums and some sub-bass to it. I thought we could do better and started remixing the song from scratch. As always, things got out of hand and it turned into a groovy chiptune drum and bass combo with live drums and vocoded voices. And that pretty much sounds exactly like how it ended up. It started very simple. You can kind of tell where they were just kind of aiming for a very traditional kind of spot-on remix, and then things just slowly started growing and improvising, and some really cool solos in there, and a lot of really cool like drum step style drums and bass too.
Things going like halftime again, and with those really heavy drum hits that really cut through the rest of the track. There's a compilation album, not compilation, but there's a small EP from an artist named Joshua Morse called Vlad 2.
I love those, but both of them are incredible.
They're both very, very good. And he did, again, it was Wicked Child, and it went into that drum and bass like kind of tempo. And it's super heavy, super, super heavy. And he actually has a Danimal Cannon do some guitar on that track too. So if you want more of this, like that is also like a great way to go. He's an amazing like jazz artist, a multi-instrumentalist. Crazy good.
Yeah, if you like Castlevania music at all, you owe yourself a lot to go check those out. Every song just sounds different from the first, and it's so well polished. One of my favorite remix albums of all time. But as far as Dorito and Eric Raven goes, these guys met on OC Remix. Eric only has a couple of remix tunes. Dorito's got a ton. And that's a lot of drum and bass stuff. He actually remixed a couple of our 4 tracks. He's done a lot of other Castlevania stuff. So he's really into the drum and bass genre, and he remixes a lot of tunes in that style. So if you're into drum and bass, or if we've just gotten you into drum and bass, go check his stuff out, and I think you'll enjoy it.
Joe Rito,
like Dorito with a J instead of a D.
Awesome. I just followed him, so I'm going to go back to him during work tomorrow. Check all that out.
Awesome. So speaking of finding more music, if you really enjoy drum and bass, Rob, you had some backups that you wanted to talk about in terms of more soundtracks people can go seek out as far as VGM goes.
Yes. Well, so if you're looking for more drum and bass inspired game music, I had quite a few backups. I really had to narrow things down. What I wanted to do for today's show was to highlight, kind of high points of the genre, landmarks of like where the genre changed and also of course what I really like. But what other games that I found a ton of great drum and bass from would be on the N64, 1080 snowboarding, Extreme G2, which is like kind of a futuristic racing game, so that kind of makes sense. Jun Chikuma did a lot of drum and bass on Bomberman Online for the Dreamcast. I didn't even realize. It's very fast. It's much, much faster. It kind of goes into that kind of like, is it drum and bass? Is it gabber? But it really is. And then Ape Escape for the Sony PlayStation by Soichi Terada is all drum and bass, and it's incredible stuff. And a lot of the music is in that kind of modular kind of fashion where the tracks will kind of evolve as you play through the game. So Ape Escape is a great introduction into that genre. And if you're just getting interested in this style of music and you want to hear more original drum and bass tracks, go online and look up Hospital Records. That's just my favorite stuff right now. Everything they're releasing right now is absolute gold. It's just catchy. It's fun. I love every bit of it. And they go all the way back to 2004. So, if you want to hear more, check them out.
I'm going to have to check that out. That sounds really good. Very cool. One thing I wanted to kind of expand on, you mentioned 1080 snowboarding for the N64. That was composed by Kenta Nagata. A lot of his stuff is just really, really good contemporary electronic music. So find some more soundtracks from Kenta Nagata. Okay. You won't be disappointed at all with his music. He's a fantastic composer that I don't think gets enough playtime. So we'll try to share some more of his tracks on VG Embassy in the future.
Can you think of any games off the top of your head?
Well, anything from the PlayStation between 1993 and 1996.
I didn't mean to catch you off guard there, but I was genuinely
remember
curious.
like G Police had a really good soundtrack.
Okay. Yeah, G Police. Okay.
If you remember, like Loaded had some good stuff on there. I'm just trying to think of a lot of those European and UK developed games from back then that really, they really grabbed a lot of those electronic music producers. Yeah, I think G Police was recently featured on one of Michael Bridgewater's Forever Sound versions.
Yes, yeah, that's where I picked that up. Oh my gosh! Okay, I just image Googled Loaded for the PlayStation. For the longest time, I thought this game came out on the Sega Genesis.
Really?
And I've been looking for it. I'm like, what is that crazy violent game where you're shooting and there's blood everywhere and it's kind of top down? No, yeah, it was on the Sony PlayStation, and it looks just as violent as I remember it.
It's a very kind of primitive PlayStation game, but it's a lot of fun, and that's got a soundtrack in part by Pop Will Eat Itself, who was this kind of rap electronic pop punk band from the UK around that same time.
That's right.
They're worth checking out.
Yeah,
Clint Mansell, who was the lead vocalist in Pop Will Eat Itself, now does movie soundtracks for movies like Requiem for a Dream and Moon, and a whole bunch of really cool electronic movie soundtracks. So something else to check out. Oh,
I love when you see these electronic artists sort of like shift and evolve into different film spaces and TV spaces. It's really neat seeing that with Disaster Piece too. I love seeing like the kind of that chiptune style being translated into, other soundtracks. So, but cool. Yeah, that's really interesting. Did not expect to see that. A little fun bonus.
Yeah. So we are wrapping up our show for the night. Rob, please, where can we find Rhythm and Pixels on the internets?
Well, if you like video game music and you like to hear two best friends hanging out, drinking tea, and getting silly with each other, my show, Rhythm and Pixels, it's a weekly show every Monday. It's at rhythmandpixels.com. You can check us out on iTunes, Spotify. If you can listen to podcasts on it, you can find us there. Go to youtube.com, search Rhythm and Pixels there. We have a live stream 24/7 music radio station on YouTube. I can never describe this thing correctly, but it plays 8-bit, 16-bit music. It has it's custom playlists from other podcasters. I think you're on there. You have Ed's picks of like your crazy like FM synth fun, and
that's right. Yeah,
Keyglyph has her own stuff on there. There's classic Forever Sound version picks on there, so it's really cool. All sorts of playlists. I keep meaning to update it, but there's so much music on there, so check that out.
It's the VGM version of Lo-Fi Beats to Study too, basically.
Pretty much. Yeah, you can put that on and then get to work, because it's if you wanted to hear an NES track for 3 minutes, and there you go.
And yeah, I mean, I've been listening to Rhythm and Pixels, you guys, since episode 1.1, I think. I think when you guys first announced your show, I was
amazing.
Like, it's another VGM podcast with Pixels in the name, because I had Pixel Tunes. My buddy Brian was Pixelated Audio, and you were Rhythm and Pixels. I'm like, how are they going to keep these VGM podcasts straight? But it seems like we all have the same basic core group of listeners anyway. So.
I know. I jumped in not knowing there were all of these other shows. I was like, oh no, the Legacy Music Hour is on a hiatus. I better do something. Oh, they're coming back. Well, I'm going to do it anyway. And then there's a whole community of people all over the country and the world doing this sort of thing.
It's so great that they left for a little while, and so great that they came back, because I jump-started this whole little community we've got going here. So.
Yeah, I hope they're cool with that.
I hope so. I'm pretty sure they are.
I'm pretty sure too.
So, as always, I'd like to give a giant thank you to Indira for the podcast artwork, and Trevin Hughes, a.k.a. Dread, for the amazing VG Embassy theme song. You can find VG Embassy, just like Rob said, on anywhere podcasts are found: Google Play, Stitcher, iTunes. If you are listening to us on iTunes, please drop by and leave us a rating and a like and a comment. That'll help give us more visibility for future listeners who want to listen to cool VGM podcasts. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/The VG Embassy. We are at Twitter at The VG Embassy, and Instagram at The VG Embassy. You can also check out our website, thevgembassy.com, and from there you can jump off to our Patreon site and our Discord web server. Our Discord is full of amazing peeps like Rob and his buddy Pernell, And,
mostly Purnell. Mostly Purnell.
Yeah. But also other VGM podcasters like The Dyad and Keyglyph, etc. And speaking of Patreon, I'd like to thank our Patreon patrons at the tourist level, Mr. Chris Murray, Cameron Childs, and Michael Bridgewater from Forever Sound Version. Our VG emissaries, Chris Myers, Donovan Orofino, Ben the Dyad Dishman, John Jekyll, a.k.a. Mixix Master, Chris Steenerson, and Jordan Worma from the Table to Stage podcast. Our audio attaché members, Cameron Worma, Carlito from the Heroes 3 podcast, and Scott McElhone. And our VG ambassador, the patron saint of VGM podcasts, Alex the Messenger.
We salute you.
We salute you. A giant VGM podcast salute. Rob, again, thank you so much for hanging out with me. I've learned so much about drum and bass. Man. I can't wait to go check out all the references that you gave us during the show.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's been a blast, and I always love hanging out with you anyway, so this has been really good. Can I give a really quick, one last shout out? Your theme song by Dread is super rad. I love hearing it. Isn't it so good? And Dread was one of your first episodes of the show. Is one of my favorite episodes. He's well spoken. He's got amazing taste in music. You can hear where all of his influences are coming from. It's so good. It's a really good episode.
He's such an amazing composer and such a great guy. I'm looking forward to having him back on the show. We've got a show in the works with a very cool theme that I can't wait to share. He's just getting settled in his new personal digs, so we're gonna give him some time, and he'll be back soon, I'm sure. Cool. So, with that said, we will be back in another 2 weeks with an amazing VG Embassy episode. So until then, I bid you farewell, people. Have a great night.